Okay, so in this video, first of all, I'm going to be walking through the sheep's pen. At least in the beginning. I might climb over and get out of here. The sheep might be a little afraid of me, so I'm going to speak a little bit quieter. You see some of them are already moving towards the back of the pen. We're going to walk along this way, just so they don't get too scared. Goats are over there. They're in a little bit of a smaller pen for now, but over the winter, we have to keep them in there. The sheep also are going to move for the summer once we're done shearing them, but they don't move just yet. They're all going to flock up. So the thing that I wanted to talk about in this video, I think we're going home. Oh well. The thing I wanted to talk about in this video is the idea of livestock and wild animals. So for example, things like sheep, chickens, cows. A lot of people say things that they are wild animals, right? And they have this impression that livestock are wild animals, but they're not, right? Livestock are a separate category. They're also not pets, which I think is why people get confused, because they don't really want to call livestock pets, right? Because that's obviously not true. A cow is not a pet. I'm going to have to climb over this fence, so let's see if I can do it while still talking. That's going to be impressive. So anyway, livestock are not pets, obviously. And even people who keep cows and goats are, I guess, maybe the exception, but sheep and things like that as pets quickly kind of realize that they're not really pets. But it kind of confuses us because they're also not wild animals. And a lot of people seem to put them in the category of wild animals, but they're not. They're a category of their own called livestock. And the difference is that just like cats and dogs, cattle and sheep and pigs and all of that are domesticated, right? They're not, I guess I'll get into the cattle pen here. They're probably not going to bother me. Are not, wild, right? They can't live in the wild. They don't want to live really in the wild. They're domesticated, just like cats and dogs. So, just like if you were to release cats and dogs into the wild, some of them would survive, but some of them also might not. There's Eleanor. She doesn't care. Just the same way, some of the cattle might survive, but most of them probably wouldn't, right? Depending on the environment and stuff like that. But again, they're also, so people come a lot here and they say, oh, be careful of the wild animals, right? And they're talking about the goats or something like that. Whereas, things like ducks or geese, which you see in the pond over there, are probably more, better described as wild than cows. They're less, I guess they're less dangerous, maybe, I don't know. Or they're less, maybe intimidating is the right word, because cattle are very large. But they're probably about as wild, or more wild, because they're not used to people and they don't really like people. Whereas cows are trained, probably better trained than most dogs. Another fence we're going to have to hop. A lot of cows are probably better trained than most dogs, and they're more used to people than, a lot of cats. Or they like people better, maybe would be a better way of putting it. But, I think because people don't have as much contact with livestock animals, they think of them as wild animals. And they think of something like what we have here, with our sheep and our goats and things like that, as almost like a zoo. But it's not. It's a farm, right? It's a historic farm. Oh, the rams spilled their water. Oh well. They're also going to move into a bigger summer field. This is kind of their winter field, but they're going to move into a nice big summer field soon, once they eat up a lot of the grass over here, which they pretty much already did. Wait for that plane overhead. So yeah, anyway, especially animals are not, wild. If I get in under this fence, I don't think I'm going to be able to get out, so we'll just stay on this side. So they're not wild, exactly, right? But also they're not pets. Sheep are not a pet. Cows especially are not a pet. But they've been trained to live and bred to live with people for at least 10,000 years, likely much longer, probably closer to 50,000. And they can't really live without people. So for example, let's take the sheep. These are male, these are rams, but it's the same thing. They get, as you see, especially the back one there, they get really puffy. And eventually, it's getting hot out here, and eventually, if we don't shear them, if we don't shave them, essentially, take the wool off, they'll overheat, and they could die. Now, people would be saying, well, how the heck would that work in the wild? Wouldn't they just die in the summer? Well, wild sheep do not look like these sheep. Wild sheep do not have the kind of wool or the kind of fleece that these sheep have. It'll stop growing at some point, and it's not as hot. But we have bred these sheep, just like we've bred most dogs, to kind of, benefit us, right? And so what do we want out of sheep? We want more wool. So we bred them to have a lot of wool. We bred them to have a lot of stuff that we can take off. But the contrast to that is that they need us to survive. Because if we just let these guys loose in the wild and nobody shaved them for the spring or for the summer, they would die of heat exhaustion, right? Because they would just get too hot and they would overheat. Some of them might survive, but most of them probably wouldn't. So, that's kind of the thing, is that, again, just like a dog, some dogs are like this too, because they've been bred for their hair to just grow and grow and grow. Whereas, something like a bear or even a wolf, their hair will stop growing at some point, right? Whereas with dogs, some dogs, breeds anyway, that's not the case. We have my nice historic car there. That's completely ingoing with the 1880s theme. So don't question that. And our nice Ford truck there. So there you go. But anyway, so that's just a quick little video. Again, animals are not wild. They're livestock, which is why there's a separate category. They're not really pets either, but they are domesticated. They can be trained. Most of them are. They do listen to people. They do generally like people just about as much as cats and dogs do. And they're not wild, right? They're trained. They're used to people, and they are unpredictable. But just like a dog, just like a cat, they can hurt you, right? But they're not wild. It's not like going to a zoo and seeing the lion cage, right? It's different, because especially you see Eleanor in the background. Eleanor is trained to walk with you. She knows how to walk. She was trained on a leash from a young age. So if you walk alongside of her, she does know how to walk properly. And obviously, you could train cattle like this to walk with a yoke, to pull a plow and things like that, to work for you, to work with you. These are females, but I mean, I guess you could if you really wanted to. You could also train sheep and goats to do that if you really wanted to. So again, they are not, they're not wild. Hopefully that teaches people something, that, there's a difference between, there's a middle ground between wild animals and pets, and that's livestock, right? So they're domesticated animals, but they're not animals that you can keep on a house, right? But they're also not animals that can really live on their own. So, domestic cattle are kind of the same thing, where they're not the same as free-running cows and cattle and things like that. They wouldn't really survive on their own, because they're not bred as having to worry about that sort of thing. So yeah, that's just a quick video on wild animals. Judith is looking at the camera. That's fine. She's eating plenty of the nice grass that's finally growing for them, so they can have a little bit less of the hay and a little bit more of the grass, which they seem to like. So yeah. Anyway, I hope that was informative. I hope I didn't just kind of rant too much about, because that's something that a lot of people, you overhear a lot, which is, oh, look at the wild animals, or be careful of the wild animals, or something like that, when people come. And, you know, it's just one of those things where it's, I guess we're disconnected from the farm in a lot of different ways, and we're disconnected from farming as a lifestyle, so we don't really understand that, you know, these aren't, you know, like going to the zoo. Cows have been bred by people for tens of thousands of years, and they're, you know, about as domesticated as dogs and cats are. And nobody would call them wild animals if you saw them at a, you know, even if you saw them in a pen like this, at a petting zoo or something, no one would call dogs a wild animal. But anyway, hopefully you learned something, and see you soon.